Kyle Larson, second quickest during Indy 500 testing? Let's talk about that, and let's crunch the numbers ahead of this weekend's race at Texas. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. Real quick, I'd like to plug my most recent episode of Power Hour, the podcast I do with NASCAR driver Brennan Poole. Click the top link down in the description to check out our latest episode. Justin Haley joined us midway through as our special guest. Learned a lot about him, his time at Colleague, his recent transition to Rick Ware Racing. A lot of good stuff in that episode. I encourage you to check it out. It's available on YouTube, and the audio version is available wherever you get your podcasts. All those links are in the description. Kyle Larson set the second fastest overall time during Indy 500 testing yesterday morning. Sure, he may have got some help from the draft, but Kyle Larson looks pretty comfortable out there. Larson will be a fascinating story to follow during the month of May. If you missed my episode yesterday, Kyle Petty was the special guest, and I asked him about NASCAR's lack of superstars. Specifically, I asked him if the next-gen car being so equal would make it harder for superstar drivers to emerge. And as you would expect from Kyle Petty, he had a very candid response. I'll play a short clip.
Will we see guys that start today even get close to 60 wins? Will 60 to some of these drivers, will that be the new 200? How do you establish yourself as a superstar when you can only win 2 or 3 races a year? How do you establish yourself and separate yourself from the pack when you can only win 4 or 5 races a year? We don't have superstar race car drivers. We just don't. And we've not had a superstar race car driver in a long time in the sport, the way I look at it. Kyle Larson could be that guy, but he would be that because of what he does away from the sport.
I don't think NASCAR's current platform will create superstars on its own. It's going to take the Netflix show showcasing more personality. It's going to take drivers pursuing other media opportunities away from the track. It's going to take drivers doing superhuman things in other cars in addition to NASCAR to create superstars. That's why Kyle Larson attempting the Indy 500 is so interesting. He's already a star amongst race fans. They know about all his dirt success, Chili Bowl Kings Royal, you name it. They know him as a Rolex 24 winner, a NASCAR Cup Series champion. But can Kyle Larson, with no prior IndyCar experience, get behind the wheel at the Brickyard and contend in one of the largest races in the entire world? Caitlin Clark is a superstar because she's been able to do things in women's college basketball that no one else has done before. Shohei Ohtani is a baseball superstar because he's the modern day Babe Ruth. We never thought we'd see someone like this again. I'm not expecting Kyle Larson to go out and win the Indianapolis 500, but if he makes some noise at the Brickyard and he's able to contend later that evening in the Coke 600, Larson could legitimately establish himself as one of those true American sports superstars. Racing dominates Memorial Day weekend, that Sunday in particular. Could Kyle Larson become a household name, a name that transcends the NASCAR and racing bubble? It may be a long shot, but right now, Kyle Larson is the best shot NASCAR has at landing their next superstar driver. High stakes are always interesting to talk about. I am looking forward to the month of May. I'm also looking forward to this weekend's Texas triple header. Let's bring in NASCAR analytical expert Ryan Stevens from wintherace.info to preview Sunday's Cup Series race. I'm now joined by Ryan Stevens from wintherace.info. Ryan, it's always great to see you. Texas Motor Speedway this weekend, my home track, so I'm probably more excited than most to be going to the Lone Star State. It's an interesting race, though, a lot cooler than last September when we saw record high temperatures at TMS. Now it'll be, I say cooler, still in the 80s most likely. That's pretty nice for Texas around this time of year. Also, an April race, a non-playoff race, first non-playoff race at Texas in the next gen era, unless we count that wacky all-star race that feels like a fever dream from a couple of years ago. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Ryan, Texas is such a unique track. When we're looking at setting our fantasy lineups, maybe making some bets, what past races, maybe recent races, can we look at for reference to try and determine who's really going to be good this weekend?
Really, we're just trying to look at Las Vegas from last year and this year, Charlotte, Kansas, Texas, obviously, we're there. So just like, 1.5s or some higher speed. Some of these other tracks, might have a little more tire fall off than Texas, but it wasn't like it was non-existent last time. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But basically, the 1.5s that show some higher speed, and that's what we're looking at this week. Who has had the speed on this type of racetrack in this intermediate package?
Yeah, I mean, most recently, the only other traditional mile and a half we've raced at this year was Las Vegas about a month ago. And in that race, there was one or two clear front runners. Tyler Reddick was close all day, second in all the stages, second by feet at the end. But it was Kyle Larson a month ago who swept the stages, dominated Las Vegas. Hendrick Motorsports 1-2-3 at Martinsville. Texas couldn't be really any more different than Martinsville. But Kyle Larson, is he worthy of being the odds-on favorite this weekend?
Yeah, I think he's the rightful favorite. I mean, Reddick might have caught him at Vegas if there was a couple more laps there, even half a lap maybe, but Larson is definitely the rightful favorite. Looking at all the tracks I named last year and then Vegas from this year, Larson's ran almost 70% of his laps inside the top five,
Wow.
which is pretty crazy compared to the second place guy there, who's Hamlin, who's about 55%. And they're the only two that have ran over 50% of their laps inside the top five during all those races. And then if we look at the fast lap percentage in that same sample size, this is where Larson really separates himself. He's ran over 20% of the fastest laps, while the second place driver sits at only 8.5%. So he's just
Goodness.
like in a whole other tier by himself on this track type. So yeah, I mean, he's the rightful favorite. You kind of go into this race like it's everyone against Larson, and something's got to go wrong for him to not take it down. But we've seen seven different winners the last seven races here, so I'm sure we'll get into that in a little bit too.
Yeah, Texas Motor Speedway quietly has become one of the hardest tracks on the schedule to predict. It's not quite super speedway levels, but even a few years ago, I think about when the two RCR teammates stayed out, blocked the field on the restart, and were able to finish 1-2 on old tires. Like that was before RCR had Kyle Busch and was looking like a legit formidable threat. So Texas Motor Speedway is a wacky track. I'll use that word. Some would use a different word. I would use wacky. It is a wacky racetrack. Who are some drivers or teams maybe that you're staying away from this week because maybe the mile and a halves don't seem to suit everyone right now?
Well, when I was doing some research, just trying to look through some top 10 bets the other day, I ran across one guy. I thought it was pretty interesting because he's got a new alliance this year with Penske, but it's front row and it's Michael McDowell. I thought it was interesting that he's 0 for 25 in top 10 finishes at Texas. I thought
Yeah.
maybe, with the volatility here, he would have snuck in there eventually. But 0 for 25, and even with the Penske Alliance, I had front row 25th and 33rd in my true performance ranks at Vegas early this year, so they didn't really bring anything there. But it's like I said, it's hard to steer clear of everyone. We've seen over 10 cautions in five out of the last six races, and that's omitting the one where the tires kept exploding. So, yeah, it'll be fun. I think when they lower the banking and widen this track, we could see some three wide, some aggressive drivers, brings more speed into play. So maybe some, I hate to say it, but less talented drivers might find themselves up front, getting a little too aggressive, and things can happen. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, the turns 1 and 2 especially have widened a bit, or the groove has widened a bit since the repave and reconfiguration, but it's still sketchy. It's still deceivingly wide. You can't run all the way out there. Still a big wide stretch of track that's no man's land. That's an interesting stat about Michael McDowell. No top tens at Texas. I guess this track has always left a bad taste in his mouth. He had a kind of a rude welcoming 15 years ago, that scary qualifying crash, and he just hasn't liked the place since. I guess I can't say I blame him. But let's get more positive. A lot of talk about Kyle Larson. Maybe Tyler Reddick, maybe some Toyotas could spoil the party this week. Are there any drivers or teams you have your eye on that could play spoiler, or maybe also deserve to be considered favorites?
Yeah, if I look at my true performance ranks from Vegas earlier this year, there was a lot of Toyota. I had him two. So behind Larson, who I had ranked as the number one car of that race, we had Toyota's second, third, fourth, sixth. So they're all right
Wow.
there. It was Reddick, Truex, Gibbs, Hamlin, just lurking. But if we're going to talk about some guys that might sneak in there too, what about Bubba? Reddick's teammate. Um, there's a guy who was super fast here last time they were here. And this is kind of his track type. We mentioned Kansas as a comp. We saw what he did at Kansas when they brought a fast car for him.
That's true.
And one other dark horse I'll mention, I like Ross Chastain a lot. Chastain, you know, we're using the same tire code, if we're going to talk about that, from Texas last year, Vegas this year. There's only 5 drivers that have had a top 10 true performance rank in those races. 4 of them are they're 4-1, 6-1, 7-1, 7-1, all the favorites. Byron, Hamlin, Reddick, Larson. Chastain's sitting at 16-1, and he's the 5th driver that has done that. So I put him up kind of with the elite guys when we look at stuff like that. And 16-1 seems like a very good number here.
Yeah, and I know it's a completely different style of mile and a half, but if you believe in mojo, Daniel Suarez's teammate won at Atlanta a few weeks ago, and it's a great point. Ross Chastain kind of flew under my radar, but he did finish top 5 here last fall. I think back to that All-Star race a couple of years ago. He was running up front before that weird crash with Kyle Busch, kind of just a weird fluky deal. But Texas is full of fluky deals. I think was it last year's race we saw a massive pileup on the front straightaway. So anything can happen. You want to be out front ahead of the chaos. But and as I'm rambling here, even Kyle Larson couldn't escape the chaos at the front of the field last year. So gonna be a wacky race. I'm gonna keep using that word wacky because I'm not gonna criticize my home track as heavily as others might. But Ryan, that was great stuff. Really good data, good analytics, great stats. Always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for being on the show this week.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
A huge thank you again to Ryan for being on the show. Check out more of his work at wintherace.info. That link is also down in the description below. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. We talk NASCAR just about every single day here on Out of the Groove. And a huge thank you, as always, to my very generous Patreon supporters. I will see you all at Texas Motor Speedway this weekend. Home race for me. I'm excited. Hope we get some great action Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Have a wonderful rest of your day, folks. I will see you again real soon.